Hello, students, and welcome to week 7 of your 3D modeling course. And this week we'll be talking about unwrapping. Now, there was a small video, hopefully, that you watched beforehand about how to quickly do seam and peels. We're going to focus over that again, and this time we're going to start with some basic objects that hopefully will get you to the texturing process. And if you have Photoshop or another type of paint software, I highly recommend that you sign up for at least a free 30-day trial of Photoshop if you cannot afford Photoshop, or find an alternative program like GIMP or Manga Studio that is available for cheap, and that will work just as well. I'd also recommend programs like 3D Coat. 3D Coat has a free 30-day trial. I am currently using that right now, and it is a highly recommended texturing program. If you have a tablet or a Cintiq, that would be really well. If not, just follow along and we can texture just grabbing images off the internet, so don't worry about it too much. Now, today we're going to talk about a bit about projection unwrapping and basically laying out unwraps of 3 different objects. And we're just going to use very basic objects for now, and then we're going to take it one step further and start texturing different objects as we go. So I want you to make a box, just a box. Make the length, width, and height all the same. So I'm just going to make them, for me, 40, 40, 40. And keep the length and width segments, let's put them to 2, 2, 2. So what you should have, hopefully, is an object, a box that looks like this. I'll change the color of my box so you can see it a bit clearer. Like that. 2, 2, 2. Next step I want you to do is make a sphere beside that. We're going to change the segments of the sphere to, let's say, 18. You should have a sphere that looks like this. So we have a box, we have a sphere. And next we're going to create a cylinder. And you can make this any height that you want. The same with the sphere. You can make it about the same radius as the box. Doesn't really matter about the size right now. What we're going to do is we're going to unwrap one of these at a time. So when you want to unwrap something in 3D Studio Max, essentially what you want to do is go to the object and convert it to an editable poly. So you should be in editable poly mode like that. And you want to go to our modifier list and find the modifier Unwrap UVW. Remember, anytime you click open the modifier list, you can type in what you're looking for, or you can scroll down the list and find Unwrap UVW. So the unwrap is essentially what you want to do to every single part of the model. This allows you to lay out the entire 3D model in 2D space. So if you want to remember what unwrapping is, it's laying out your 3D model in 2D space. Okay. So we have our 3D model here. Our box is currently selected. You can see box. We have the unwrap modifier. Now, normally the first thing that happens, and it may happen, it may not to you, is that, we have green lines that form around our model. These are what's called seam lines. Max has automatically unwrapped our model. Well, as we created it, Max automatically unwrapped our model, which created these seam lines. So if I go to Open UV Editor, you can see we actually have green seam lines around our UV here and white lines. And that's just by going to Unwrap UVW, and you can be in any of these modes, vertex, edge, or polygon, and going down to Edit UVs, Open UV Editor, we have this panel here. Now this is technically what our 3D model is laid out flat in 2D. But you can see, if I click here, and here, and here, all these polygons are overlaid on top of each other. They're all located in this red area right here. All these ones are located in top right. And you can see if I click around, this entire UV map is messed up because essentially you're seeing all this from one view. Okay, you're seeing all these corners in the same view, and that's not good because that means if I load up an image on this 3D model, it's all going to load the same part of this image. So a little explanation about the unwrapping process. So you want to, after you add an Unwrap UVW modifier, the first thing you normally want to do is go to Edit UVs and open this UV editor to see this. Now what you're looking at here is called the Edit UV window. And the Edit UV window has 3 sections. We have our basic toolbar at the top. We have our main viewport window and our sidebar here, which has our quick access tools that we have access to. Now in the middle viewport, we can click polygons, edges, and vertexes just like we can in 3D space, but we're only working in 2D space. We're not worrying about any depth. We're just working on the X and the Y axis. So you could see I can grab all these polygons one by one or just little parts like this, and I can move them anywhere I want as well. You can see I can move it like this, move it like that. So I can move it all around no matter how I want. So I'm able to move, rotate, scale like this by using the move, rotate, and scale buttons. Now you can push QWE and select between move, rotate, and scale. So I can rotate, I can move, and I can scale. And if you want to scale just like horizontally or vertically, left click and hold on the scale tool here, and you can do horizontal and vertical as well. So the trick to this is that everything in the gray area outside here is not going to be rendered in your unwrap, meaning you can't draw on it and you can't add image detail to it. Anything that's inside this box, you can draw and add images and details to it. Okay, so you kind of want everything to be in this box by the time everything is unwrapped. And if you have a current object like this one, it's unwrapped so that every face is overlapping each other, and that's an issue. We don't want overlapping vertices unless all the sides of your boxes are going to be identical. No polygons should be overlapping each other like they currently are here. And you notice I can play around in 3D space, and it affects what I have in 2D space here, right? So we're able to manipulate single polys at a time, and you can see the overlaps. You can see how they're overlapping each other. So we need a way to sort of separate all these polygons out. So that's where projection mapping comes in. And if we go down here, we go down our list inside the 3D space here, we have our edit UV, unwrap UV polygon stuff. We have a thing called projection mapping. Now, what projection mapping is telling 3D Studio Max is that whatever polygons you have selected, like this here, projection mapping, when you click on one of these options, you're telling a special camera to look at the model from that perspective, like from a flat perspective, from a cylindrical perspective, from a spherical or box, and you're telling it to look at this model that way so that it lays it out inside our scene here. So what you want to do first off is grab everything from your Edit UVW window and drag it off. That means everything is not in my working space. This is going to be my final space here. This is just kind of left off to the side so I can work with it a little bit afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one side of my box here, and I'm going to go projection, planar map. And you can see what happened is it actually messed up a little bit. It's actually looking at it from a different perspective than I want. That's because when you click on a projection map, like here, we have projection, planar, it opens up alignment options, and we can align it to different alignments that match what we're going for. X, okay, it's not X. Y, it looks like Y. And you can see Z is from the top view. Z is from the top view, Y is from the front, and X is from the side. So we want it from the Y view, or you can click best alignment, or view alignment as well. So if you click best alignment, this is the best alignment that our planar map has. Once you've set it up and everything looks good here, I want you to click off the projection map. Now you have access to this side of the face and only this side of the face. You see if I click anything else, that's all in the working space over here. But this face is right over here. So I have successfully unwrapped one side of my box. And I have that here. I can do the same for all the other sides now. Because it's a very flat surface, I can use the planar map and unwrap all these sides. And I can always just click on best alignment and do that. So I'm going to do that. So go around your model. And I want you to get used to clicking planar map, best alignment, and grabbing each face like this. And then going best alignment. And you see, you should have, at the very end of it, best alignment, you should have 6 sides. Like this. All 6 sides of our boxes are all separated now. Which means that if we texture something on one side of this box in here, then it will only draw on one side of this crate or box or whatever we want it to be. So now that I have this, I can pack this all up into my space by scaling it down and fitting it inside this box. Like that. So now we're actually able to check out a couple of things. The first thing you want to do when you're making an unwrap, especially we just unwrapped our crate, we have all 6 sides here. We kind of want to make sure that everything is scaled evenly. So there's a couple of special tools that we have in this right-hand sidebar. The first thing we want to do is go up to where it says checker pattern in this gray tile box right here. If we click on this and then click on texture checker, you see that everything changes to a number and a color. So, and you can see that we're actually previewing an image in the background. This is showing you what this texture would look like on this box. It's a little preview. And if I go back to checker pattern, checker mode, you can see we have a checker pattern. The reason why everyone likes checker pattern and why checker pattern is good is because this shows you that your unwrap is non-stretching. If it looks like a checkerboard, then that's correct. That means there's no stretching. Everything is a clear box. All boxes all the way through. Everywhere I look at, it's a box. Now, if one side was stretched out, and I'll show you an example. I will stretch out this box like this. You'll notice you get texture stretching now, meaning that if I drew an image on here, it would actually stretch across our model, and that wouldn't be very accurate. So you want to try and avoid that as best as possible, and make sure everything follows at least the sizing of a checkerboard. If it's rotated, that's okay. It doesn't really matter if it looks like this, which is rotated slightly. As long as it's all a checkerboard pattern, you are in the clear. So that's one thing to look for. At the very top here, you can see that we can switch between different ways to view the texture. You can also turn on and off to show the active map in the background, so the active map being the checker map. This will set different spaces amounts, so you don't have to worry too much about that. This one shows the different UVs. If there's multiple UV maps on one object, it will show U1, V1, and if I drag it over there, see U2, V1, so on and so forth. But normally you want everything to kind of be in one texture map, hopefully. So after we just unwrapped everything here, we kind of want to fill up as much space as possible. Remember that we're going to be rendering a square image, okay? All textures should be pretty square. Most programs like Unity, Unreal, and even 3D Studio Max load better when the image is a power of 2. So you kind of want your texture to be in the power of 2. So we want to fill up as much space as possible so that we don't waste any texture space. The easiest way to do that is to learn how to use the Arrange Elements tool. So the Arrange Elements tool right here has a few different features that are really nice. It has Pack Custom. And what Pack Custom does is it tries to pack the unwrap as best as possible to fit inside this box. You also have Rescale Elements. So these two options right here are very friendly. Rescale Elements will make sure that all sizes of every single part of this different unwraps are all the same size. They're all equal. And so currently, if I highlight all these and click Rescale Elements, they're all the same size. Every single box side is even, so that's perfect. Now I just want to scale it different ways. So we can do two things. We can click Pack Custom, or we can go over here and click Pack Together or Pack Normalize. If I go Pack Together, you see it adds a little bit of spacing between these blocks. And you'll notice if I do this mode, there's no spacing. It's better to have just a tiny bit of spacing so that you don't draw over different parts in Photoshop. And if I go to Pack Normalize, you can see it actually adds a little bit of spacing between all parts of the object. I think Pack Normalize is normally the best option after rescaling elements. So normally I click Rescale Elements and Pack Normalize, and everything is unwrapped and packed with some spacing in it to allow you to draw on different parts of the model. So now you have a finished unwrap of this box. What you should do when you're done unwrapping a box like this is to push File, Save UVs, and save your UV somewhere. Anywhere, usually in a project folder, will do just fine. Just in case something were to happen to this box, you can always load the UVs later, and that will be done. When you're done unwrapping an object, normally what I would suggest you do is close this, Edit UV Windows, right-click on Unwrap UVW. So I'm just going to right-click on it. Oops. And collapse to Editable Poly. What that will do is it'll pop up a warning that the Unwrap UVW is about to be collapsed down to Edit Poly. But this will actually save all the unwrap information as the default state of your current box. So for instance, if I go back and add the Unwrap UVW modifier again, go to Open UV Editor, you can see my UV of my box is actually all intact and all there, just as we unwrapped it. So that works out just fine. It is the new default state of our 3D model, meaning that if I run into any issues, that will be fine because it'll all be defaulted straight to that. So you never have to worry again. So after we do this, what I want you to do is make sure that your box is unwrapped completely as best as possible to fit in here. And I want you to look at a couple tools on the top toolbar here. You'll see we have WER keys like we normally use. We have selection types. We can convert polygons to vertex, polygons to edges. Remember that Unwrap UVW has vertex, edge, and polygon mode, so it's just like working in 3D space, but 2D. Now we also have these menus, which are very important. We have tools, which allow us to flip and mirror polygons or vertexes. We can weld, just like we weld inside of here. We can do target weld, which if we go to vertex mode, we can go to tools, target weld, and left click and drag and weld it to another vertex if we really want to. Or we can just go weld selected, which if you hold two vertexes really, really close, you can just go tools, weld selected, or push Control W, and that will weld. You can break apart 3D models, polygons, from other polygons. So let's say I had this crate and this polygon right here. I want this detached from the rest because I'm going to do something special to it. I can go tools, break. And you see, it broke that polygon away from the others, and it created new seam lines, these green lines here, which shows us that that model, that polygon, is separated from the rest of the polygons. That's what seam lines indicate, is that in 2D space, these polygons are separate from other polygons, and that's what a seam line does. You can also go down, and we have tools stitch if we want to stitch two parts together, which I will explain more as we go on. We also have tools relax, and most importantly, we have tools render UVW template. So this is the most important one, and the one I really want you to remember is tools render UV. Because what tools render UV allow you to do is it allows you to save the image, so save this green and white image here to your desktop so that you can draw on top of it or load it in as material. So I'm going to render this UV, and I'm going to explain a couple things about this UV menu. It's right now it's at its default setting, and normally I would never change anything about this render UV because everything is kind of at the default state that you always want to render most of your objects at. The only thing that you probably want to change is the width and the height. The bigger the image, the more detail you can put into it. And right now it usually defaults at 1024, but we can increase that. We always want to increase by the power of 2. So if it's 256, 512, 1024, 2048, those are kind of default texture sizes used in gaming and movies. So just try and always think about that. I never click guess aspect ratio because that normally comes off wrong. We can fill the texture map with different colors if we really want to by switching the mode to solid, normal, or shaded and changing the fill color here. But right now I'm just going to leave it at none because I don't want it to fill. We can turn off show overlap or keep it on red, which will show you when polygons are overlapping, which is good because you never really want polygons to overlap currently at the moment, unless it's like an old school video game. But like normally nowadays, polygons would probably never overlap. And then we can see if we want to show seam edges, if we want to turn off invisible edges, that kind of stuff. After you're done, you can just click Render UV Template. And you'll notice that you should get something that looks like this, which is your UV template. We want to save this. So if that looks okay and there's no overlap, everything looks good, you can just click the little disk icon on the top left and save that image somewhere, like to your desktop. So I'll save it to my desktop as a PNG or JPEG, whichever you prefer. PNGs are sharper, JPEGs are less memory, but they're a little blurry. So I usually save as PNG, and I'll save this as box unwrap. And you can save it with an alpha channel or without. Normally I only save an alpha channel if I really want to, but right now alpha channel is turned off, which means it'll render black in the background. And RGB, whatever RGB format works for you, 48-bit works for me. And I click OK and save it. So what you should have is a saved texture map. Remember to right click to collapse your Unwrap UVW into your edit poly when you're done. And let me close this. There's lots of 3 Studio Maxes open. And what I should have on my desktop is my box unwrapped like this. So usually what I'll do is I'll take this into a program like Paint. And I'll just draw something really quick. Like maybe I'll just fill it up with color just as an example. I'll fill this one up with gray. Fill this one up with orange. Fill this one with blue. Dark blue. orange, and kind of weird brown there, and I'll save that. So what I have now on my desktop is this image. Okay, so we added color, and if you go into Photoshop, obviously you can use layers and everything else and save that. No biggie. So we have a now colored box. So I need to apply the texture to my model. So if I push M on my keyboard, I load up what's called the material editor. So this material editor has 3 sections. You've assigned colors to objects before, but this time I'm going to teach you a little bit more detail about loading in textures. So on the left-hand side, we have all our material types. In the middle part, we have our node editor, and the third part, we have our material parameters. What I want you to do is to go to standard material and double-click on it. It'll create a standard material. You can double-click on the sphere to make the sphere slightly bigger, and you can double-click on the title to bring up the parameters. Change the name of this parameter to box texture or box material. Okay, box material. And now what we're going to do is we're going to load a texture map into this material editor. So into this material, we have it open here, and we see a couple of different material options. At the very top, we have the shader basic parameters, which tells us what type of material we want this to be. A Fong, Strauss, metal, blend, anything like that. I'm just going to leave it as a regular blend. You can make it a wireframe or two-sided, show just a face map or show just the flat polygons in face TED mode. And then we have the color section, which is ambient and diffuse, all that stuff. So I'm going to assign my material to my box. So what I do first is I grab my box in my scene, like this, make sure it's selected, and I right-click on my box material, and I click Assign Material to Selection. And you can see this box is now gray. And every time I click on this box, you can see that 4 little tick marks appear on the corner of my box material, indicating that this material is attached to this box, which is great. This is exactly what I want. So what I want to do now is assign the actual texture to it. So assign the texture to your material so it'll use it. So right beside diffuse, which is where we have our color settings, where we can change the color, there's a little box, and when you hover above it, it says none, right beside diffuse. And if you click that, it's actually going to ask you for a material map texture. And so you can click on anything here if you really want to use the samples that they provide, or you can click on bitmap, which is telling it you want to load an image from your computer, from your desktop somewhere. So I double click on bitmap, and then now it's asking me, okay, what kind of image you want to load? Where's the image? And then I just find my image wherever I have it, and mine's on my desktop. Remember that box we did? And I'm going to double click on the box. Now you can see that diffuse color here in the node editor now has a red line attached to what's called map 01, map number 1. And I'll rename this box texture. And I'm going to double click the small box so that I can expand it and see the full image of what I'm looking at. So now that I have the box material, the box texture, and it's assigned to this box, you'll notice when I loaded up that texture, it didn't appear on my box. That's because I have to right-click on the box material here and click Show Shaded Material in Viewport. Show Shaded Material in Viewport. And now you can see it actually loaded that texture and all the colors we assigned in MS Paint. And a bonus that you can do with this is if I load up, let's say, that image again, I'll go to Paint. I'll load this box Unwrap. And if I start drawing on top of it, so for instance, I take this pen tool, I draw a line, I'll grab the biggest line possible, and I'll draw like an angry face. I'll draw a smiley face. Wow. They really changed MS Paint quite a bit. Draw a smiley face. Like that. Sure, and unhappy face. Etc. And then you save this. When you go back to 3D Studio Max, look at that. Automatically loaded that texture detail in there. And you can go on and on and on and change it. So everything is looking pretty good here. So it's loading up our texture. Everything looks good. Now that was a basic box. So we unwrapped a box, we assigned a material to it, and that was great. So now we're going to go to the sphere next. So a sphere is a little bit more difficult than a box. So I'm going to convert this to an editable poly, and I'm going to unwrap this. So add the unwrap UVW modifier and go to Open UV Editor. And you can see like our sphere is a little slightly different here. And it has lots of little triangles in it. That's because in a sphere, there's a lot of triangles that point towards the top of a sphere. It's a little bit tricky, right? So we need to unwrap this properly as well. So what I'll do is I'm going to actually use a different method of unwrapping the sphere. And this one's called Pelton seams. So we learned about projection maps and how to quickly project planar maps around a box to separate the different parts of a box. Now we can do the same thing for a sphere as well. So I can grab polygons on my sphere, but wait, every time I look at something through my camera, I can only grab the polygons I'm seeing. See this? So I'm like, okay, well, it's becoming really annoying. What you want to do is go up your Unwrap UV LV template menu in polygon mode or any mode, and you see where it says select by, there's an ignore backfacing. What this is telling the camera is don't touch any polygons that the camera can't see, and it can't see the polygons that are facing away from it. So if I turn that off though, then I can select everything. So I usually keep ignore backfacing off, and I'm going to select everything here. Now we learned about projection mapping, and like I said, we can use it here as well. If I use projection mapping and go to planar, I can grab this, go to X, Y, and Z and figure out which template works best or best alignment. And you see, I get the top part of my sphere like that. And I can do the same thing for the bottom. Planar, best alignment. And now I have the top and bottom of my sphere. Now those don't look too bad, so really we can just use this. And I'm going to introduce you to a new tool called Relax. The reason why I'm going to introduce you to this is watch what happens when I go change checker pattern to texture checker at the very top right here. Change back to checker pattern. So at the very top, my model looks good. I see nothing but squares, right? But if I start going down the side, look what happens. We got some really ugly texture stretching going on here, and that's not good. And that's because the polygons here get the appropriate amount of space that I can draw on. But as we get closer towards the outer edge, does this polygon look the same like this? It doesn't. That's why I'm going to use this tool called Relax. So if I go to my Tools menu and I go to Relax, which is just right above Render UVW Template, I can relax by polygon angles, edge angles. Just try it a couple times. You can always undo anything, so don't worry. You can always just try this. But I'm going to relax by edge angles. Watch what happens. Poof. And look how much better that looks now. Now it still needs some fine tuning, but it's definitely looking more like squares now than it was just a second ago. And I can do the same for the top part here. Relax. Definitely looking a lot better than it was a second ago. Much easier to color on and everything. Now, that's this, and then we can always pack it the same way. I can go to my arrange elements, and I can go to make sure they're both the same size by clicking rescale elements, and then pack elements, and look, instant unwrap of our sphere here. Now, I can grab both of these, and I can just go to projection sphere. And I can go to best alignment for the projection of a sphere. And you can see that it's a little bit tricky trying to align this. I'm going to align it on the X, Y, Z. I'm going to start to relax. And you can see that the relaxation is a lot different than the actual model. There's a lot more curves to it. Everything looks a little bit weird. You know, it's a bit tricky. And that's normally because a lot of these polygons have seam lines in them. And you can see they're cut all weird here. So this is where I'm going to target weld some polygons together so that they match up a lot better. So what I do is I try and find out where the tears in my model are. I'm looking and I see like a weird green line here that probably shouldn't be there. And so that means there's probably like a weird cut somewhere. So I'm just checking. And look, by just touching this vertex here, I'm touching a single vertex in 3D space. And I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but if I touch this vertex here, there's two vertexes that get selected here. Both these vertexes get selected, which tells me that this is one vertex, but in my 2D space, it's actually considering it two different vertexes. So what I want to do is weld those together. Now I can either go to Control W, scale them in really close, and Control W to weld, or I can just go to Tools, Target Weld, left click and drag on one of them to the other one, and drag it together. And the reason why I can tell that these two belong together as one vertex is if I click on one, the other one turns blue, which tells me that this vertex and the other vertex here, they actually belong together and are a single vertex in my 3D space. So that's why I'm just going around and merging them. You'll notice the green lines are starting to disappear, and that's because the seam line is now disappearing. You want as few seams as possible in your 3D model so that your texture doesn't look distorted at all. So I go around my model and I'm cleaning up the actual seam lines now. One by one, cleaning up these seam lines. One by one, cleaning up seam lines. And now I have a sphere that has only one big seam line across it. And I can do my start relaxing, and I get this shape right here. And now it's pretty good to draw on. It'll be okay. There's a lot of squares. Now the checkerboard does look a little bit disorienting anyways. So this just might be something I clean up overall to look a little bit different. But there's also a different way to unwrap this. So that's using our projection method again. I could even go around and try my cylinder method. Maybe that'll work a little bit better. I can try my box method, and maybe that'll even work better. I can start the relaxing, and you can see, like, if I go to relax that, and then I go to pack elements, see my box is, my sphere has been separated because I use the box method into like a whole bunch of different sections. It's a nice checkerboard, sure, but all of these elements are all separated. And that might work for you. That might not be a problem. But for me, it's a little bit disorienting to have that many cuts in a model. That seems to be better off if I just left it as one big thing. Especially, it depends on how you're going to texture it, right? As well. If you're going to texture it so that one half of the sphere looks different than another half, you may want to just grab the top part here, projection, do a flat like this, do a little bit of relaxing. See, we have this, and then maybe the bottom part of the sphere here, same thing, best fit, relax it a bit like that. Then grab the entire middle, and I'm going to use a cylinder for this part. Best alignment for the cylinder, start relaxing it. And now I'm going to pack all my elements. I'm going to rescale them first. So rescale elements. I always rescale elements because that's the size they need to be. And then I pack them together. And boom. There you go. Now I have a center strip, a top and a bottom, and I can texture them. Go into MS Paint or Photoshop or whatever have you. After I render UVW template, render it out. Render UV template like this. Go to the top left. Save the image. Save it to my desktop, circle, and then load it through the material editor just like we did before, and push M on the keyboard. So we'll do that as an example again. Unwrap your circle. Do whatever type of unwrapping you prefer using the projection method. I'll teach you the peels and seam right afterwards. Go to Tools. Go to Render UVW Template. Render it out as a 1024 by 1024. You get something like this. I'm going to call this Sphere Unwrap. Save it as a PNG. You don't have to have an alpha channel. You can have an alpha channel if you want. I don't. I like the black in the background. Remember to save your UVs just as a backup. Then collapse the Unwrap UVW into the editable poly. Push M, go to your material editor. Load up a standard material. Give it a name. Call it Sphere Material. Go to your diffuse section. Go load a bitmap file by clicking the little box beside diffuse here. Load up bitmap. Find your sphere unwrap. Now be sure to grab your sphere inside 3D Studio Max here in the 3D part. Right click on the sphere material here. Assign material to selection. Right click on it again and go show shaded material in viewport. And because I didn't draw anything on my sphere, you should see the properly unwrapped sphere there. So what I want you to do is go take the cylinder and do the exact same thing. We have the top part of the cylinder, we have a bottom, and we have the sides. So I convert this to an editable poly first. I add an unwrap UVW modifier. I open the UV editor. I grab all the polygons, either in here or in 3D space. Remember that you can always turn off ignore backfacing to select all the polygons on the model. I go to my projection map, and what works best for a cylinder? Well, I think a cylinder works best for a cylinder. Now, a lot of people get caught on this because then they do this, and it's like, okay, cylinder's done. There's my cylinder. But wait, where's the top and bottom parts, right? We have a top cap here. Now look how much space that's taking, Remember that in the top right, we have our checker pattern. Click on texture checker and checker pattern, and you'll notice, look at that weird pattern there. Here it looks okay, minus a little texture stretching. I need to stretch it, scale it a bit to make it look like a checkerboard. But here looks messed up and here looks messed up. That's because we need to unwrap these as well. So to do that, it's a very flat space on the very top and the bottom of the cylinder. I'm just going to use projection planars for now. There you go. There's one. Look how much better that looks already. So you got to take your time with these and make sure they come out all right, right? So I got that one and that one. So I got these two shapes here. So now I'm going to rescale elements. Make sure that they're separated like this. And then I pack elements. And it did its best packing job here. And you can see we still have a little bit of empty space. So if we need to add more detail or any objects, we can. But this is how it perceives the best way to have my cylinder packed into this unwrap would be. And that's okay with me. Now there is some texture stretching. So we can take this and scale it a bit. And you see this looks like a much better checkerboard pattern. And then I repack it again. And you see I get a much more cleaner space here. It's using a lot of this space. And I can scale these up a little bit to use up more space as well. So I'm just going to do that. Like maybe something like that. And then I repack it again. And then we get this, which uses a lot more texture space, a lot more efficient. And we now have an unwrapped cylinder, which is just as easy as that. And I want you to render that out, the cylinder out, and make sure that you get that done as well. And get a texture map loaded for it as well. Don't forget to do the same process we did for the sphere in the box. Then collapse, save your UVs, then collapse your unwrap UVW into your edit poly, and everything should work out just fine, and you have these three objects. Now the other way of doing unwrapping is what's called the peel and seam way. So if I have a more complicated object, and let's say I have something like let's not do a teapot right now. Let's try a let's try a capsule, and we're going to do something unique to the capsule. So let's say I have a capsule like this, pretty low poly, and I'm going to make a couple of height segments here, and I'm going to convert to an edit poly, and I'm going to add a couple of polygons here, and extrude them outwards. And maybe couple in the front here like this. So we have a complicated shape like this. Let's just call this like a weird plane or a rocket or something like that. And now we've got to unwrap this. Now there's never going to be a perfect shape to unwrap this object. It's a little more complex, right? If I went to here and I started using like grabbing all these polys and used a plane, you could see like my best guess is like still like, well, there's a lot of polygons overlapping each other. And you can see that if I go to Tools, Render, and I have my Show Overlap on. So if I go to mode solid, watch what happens. Look at this. This is all overlapping polygons. Everything is overlapping. So we want to try a new method for unwrapping. And the method we're going to try is not just, is going to be called what seams and peel. So right above projection, we actually have a peel menu. And that has seams in it. Now, we saw like kind of what seams look like by the green marks left in our 3D model. Those were what are called like mapping seams inside 3D Studio Max. But we're going to create our own seam lines and cut parts of our model off. And how we do that is we select edges of our model and then create seams. You can see we have a mode here that should be blackened out because you should have nothing selected. And it's called Convert Edge Selection to Seams. So we need to go to Unwrap UVW Edge Mode. Now, if you're thinking about seams, think about a t-shirt, how like the sleeve fits on your actual shirt. There's usually a line there that indicates that a sleeve has been sewn on to the middle part of your shirt into separated objects. So we're trying to cut different objects away from the main body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this, let's call this the sleeve, off, like that. And then I'm cutting this sleeve off. Anything that's sticking out way too much from the main body, I want to try and cut off. And this part down here. And let's go around this part over here. And I'm going to go to this part of the menu where it says Peel and Seams, the sub-menu Seams, Convert Edge Selection to Seams. Now that I have that and clicked on it, you see that those edges turn blue. Those blue edges indicate that they are now seams. Now I'm going to go to something called Quick Peel. This will peel away all the different parts of my model, including those seam lines. The seam lines indicate that these models, these arms, will be separated from the main body. So if I go to quick peel, you can see I get 4 models: arm 1, arm 2, arm 3, arm 4, and the main body. Now they're not going to be unwrapped perfectly. It tried its best to assume what the shape would look like, but that's up to us to fix a little bit more. So now that these 5 bits of models are all separated, I can go to Tools, Relax, and I can try and see what the Relax tool will do for me. Polygon mode, edge mode, nothing's really working for me. So that means I need a little bit of unwrap work. And I'm going to go to my projection modifiers and do that. Now, I can keep adding more seam lines to make this look more correct, though, if I don't want to go on projection. I'm going to take off, let's say, this top cap. I'm going to add a seam line here. And go around and add a seam line here. Now, if you can't see your old blue lines, go down and take off map seams. It'll show you only peel seams, which are these blue lines here. So I cut off the top part of my capsule, and I'm going to do the same for the bottom part of my capsule. I'm going to cut this off too. So that means I should have 4 arms, the bottom of my capsule, and the top of my capsule. And don't forget to click convert edges to seams so that these lines are all blue. See, blue lines down there, blue lines up here, blue lines cut that. And now I'm going to go to quick peel, and we can see we're getting a much better shape. You can see the top part of the capsule, the bottom, the arms here. And now we just need a little bit of unwrapping work to get the capsule looking right. So if I grab this and then add a cylinder modifier to it, you can see I have this shape here. I'm going to go to Tools, Relax this shape a bit. It looks like I need to do a little welding here to make this look more accurate. So I go to Vertex mode, Tools, Target Weld, and I just make sure that this looks a little better. And I'll go back to relax it one more time. So I get this shape right here. And maybe I'll go click on these ones as well and relax these. Look like that. And on these ones, I should probably cut and peel one side, or just create a line down one side so it cuts it. You can also use a capsule modifier. So if I use a cylinder modifier, I can grab around this object here. I can go best alignment, and you see, look, I get this nice look. Start relax. I'll go here, cylinder, best alignment, start relax, cylinder, start relax, and cylinder right there, best alignment, start relax. And you can see I got my 4 shapes here, my top, my bottom, and now all that's left is these small shapes here. So the ends of these arms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use quick plane arms for these, choose the best alignments, and just pop them off. So I grab all of them, and I'm just going to project them all, let's say like this. We don't have to worry too much about this, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab them and start relaxing so that they all form their natural shapes. So everything should be relaxed now. I can even grab everything and click Start Relax. And you can see I get the average size of everything. I can then click Rescale Elements to make sure all the elements are equal size. And then Pack Normalize. And look at our unwrap here. Checker pattern. Nice checker pattern all over the model. A little bit of stretching here, a little bit of stretching at the tops here. But we can fix that with hopefully some polygon angle changes. Yep, relax by polygon angles. Worked a lot better. And there you go. Much, much better way of handling it. And you see we got the full thing textured. Everything is completely textured. You can also, when you go to Pack Normalize, you can click on Rotate as well. And this will rotate all the models to fit a lot better in. And you can even squish it closer. I like doing normalize here, because it leaves a little space between all the models. And you can see how much like space it saved us. Everything looks good. Everything looks nice and crisp. And if we render this out, we can draw on top of it and do that. So what I'd like you to do is make sure that you go through the box, go through the sphere, go through the cylinder, and then start making an odd shape, maybe a missile or a rocket or something like that, and try and cut it apart and try and use quick peel, and then try and use projection to clean up, and then make sure to play around with arrange elements, rescale elements, and pack normalize. And that might help out as well. So there's lots of little tricks and tips. Just start with those. We'll move on to the next step. Don't forget to assign materials as well to see if you make it through that step. And we'll keep pushing forward with this. Good luck.